This happened years ago when I was 19. I'm now in my mid-20s. I still remember this very clearly because of how creeped out I was. Back then, I was living 600 miles away from my parents in a different state. Even though there was a distance, my mom and I still talked on the phone at least twice a week, and we were still really close. So, when we found out that her cancer was back, I didn't think twice about dropping everything to drive down to see her. A plane ticket would be too expensive, and I had a 10-year-old Toyota that might have been a bit beat up, but it still got me from A to B cheaply and quietly. My parents weren't thrilled at the idea of me driving the 11 hours by myself, but my mind was made up. So they offered me a deal. I would stop at a rest stop every 2 or 3 hours and stretch my legs and call them, and in exchange for this courtesy, they would pay for my gas. If I didn't call within the 3-hour window though, they would assume I had been in an accident and call me repeatedly, interrupting the audiobook or podcast they knew that I would have on. I accepted the deal. And that's why I was at this particular rest stop at 2:45 a.m. This was actually one of the nicer stops. Well lit, multiple vending machines that didn't have huge cages around them. The payphone wasn't broken, and it looked clean. There were a couple cars there with people sleeping in them. I still had 15 minutes before I had to check in with my parents. I got out of my car and stretched and then almost jumped out of my skin when I heard a man's voice right behind me. "Miss, can I ask you for a favor?" I turned around and he's leaning against my car. I have no idea how he got there so fast. I didn't see him when I parked, but there he was, uncomfortably close to me. He looked like he was in his 40s. He didn't look dirty or twitchy. He was too close, but his body language didn't scream threatening. And even though I was 19 years old, barely over 5 feet and at that point in my life, 110 pounds soaking wet, and even though I had already binged a whole lot of true crime media and knew the dangers of a girl my age alone at night with an out-of-state license plate, my dumbass asked what he needs. He told me that he accidentally locked his keys and his phone in his truck, and could he just borrow my phone really quick to call his friend? It will just take a second and it would really help him out. And I almost handed him my phone. I was reaching into my pocket to hand it to him with a Pollyanna, "No problem." And then I actually looked at his face. Like I said, this rest stop was surprisingly well lit, and this guy looked really normal, except for his eyes. He had dead shark eyes. You know what I'm talking about. It's the Ted Bundy serial killer eyes. They're smiling, but the eyes are vacant and creepy, and staring way too hard. I got that feeling, that runaway feeling. I knew immediately not to hand this guy my only way to call for help. So I put on my best customer service smile and told him, "God, I'm sorry, I don't have a charger, and I need to save all my battery for the tracking that my parents have on my phone. And I need that juice to call my parents, which I actually have to do right now. But good luck." And I turned and walked about 20 feet away. And he doesn't leave. He was still just leaning against my car watching me. And now I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to leave him alone with my car because he creeped me out, and he has the serial killer face. So going to the bathroom is out. But I also wanted to get away from him, prove that I'm not going to help and maybe that he'll leave. I could technically get into the car, but I would have to get really close to him unless I crawled over my passenger side seat, and he's not moving. So I did the first thing that popped to mind. I called my dad, and my dad, for the first time that night, didn't pick up the phone. When I heard his voicemail, I glanced back. The guy still hadn't moved. He's still just staring at me. So I faked a phone conversation with my dad. I angled my body so that the guy couldn't see that I'd hung up the phone, and loudly said that I should be home in about 30 minutes, when in reality I was about 4 hours away. I mentioned exactly where I was, and reassured the fake caller that this was a good rest stop, with plenty of lighting and a couple visible security cameras. The guy still hadn't moved, and I'm running out of steam on this fake conversation. In the years since, I've thought of a lot of things I could have said while pretending to talk to my dad. But in that moment, I was beginning to seriously freak out, and my mind went blank. So I hung up, and I didn't know what to do. I had hoped the fake call would have scared him off, but he was still leaning against my car. I stalled for another couple of minutes. I bought cookies from the vending machine. I walked around a little. At this point, he had been leaning against my car staring at me for at least 10 minutes. I honestly debated walking up to one of the men sleeping in their parked cars and asking for help. And just the thought of having to wake someone up to help me get into my own car annoyed me enough that I stopped stalling and I headed back to my car. I decided that unless he touched me, I'm just going to pretend that he isn't there. He waited until I was unlocking my car door before he started talking to me again. He told me again that he really needed to use my phone. He's stranded here unless he can call his friend to bring the spare keys. He's not angry or begging. His voice sounds weirdly friendly. But he had been creepily watching me for way too long while blocking my exit, so I'm not falling for it. I almost pointed out the working payphone, just in case I'm wrong about this and I was being mean to this guy who needed help. But then he leaned forward as I was getting in, and I lost all nerve and slammed and locked the door as fast as possible. He didn't move until I started the car and put it in reverse, and then he finally stepped back and let me pull out. I didn't even have my seatbelt on. I was so focused on getting away from him. And then halfway out of the rest stop, my mom called me. My mom, who would freak out if I don't pick up, and who was already sick. And I needed to put on my seatbelt. I could still see him in my mirror. He was standing right next to where I was, parked with his back to me. He was far enough away that I felt okay parking again to answer the phone, but I kept my engine running and I kept watching him. I don't want my mom to worry, so I told her everything is fine. Where I am, my ETA. Now that I was in my locked car away from him, I was beginning to feel like I had overreacted. She scolds me about speeding, and I tune her out because the guy is moving now. As my mom lectures me about road safety, I watch the guy cross to a truck, unlock the door and get in. The keys being locked in no longer seemed to be an issue for him. I watched the truck head back out to the freeway and drive out of sight. I had to pretend to be fine, not to upset my mom. I didn't get back onto the road for another 20 minutes, and when I did, I didn't speed. I did not want to see that truck. I found out years later that the closest city to that rest stop has a major problem with trafficking, and that girls who look like they don't live nearby, or maybe look like they are living out of their cars, tend to be targets. I don't know if that was what was happening, or if he was just trying to scare me into handing over my phone. Either way, creepy guy at the rest stop. Let's not meet. I guess I should give some background before I get into the story. I became homeless in late January, so I'm living in my car with my 120-pound female mastiff, who is a guardian breed. She keeps me very, very safe and always has. We have a routine in the mornings. First, I walk her at my cousin's house. Then I go to the local rest stop to use the facilities, and brush my teeth and wash my face and whatnot. After that, I go to a park and ride right by the rest stop to walk my dog again. Because of the virus, lots of people frequent this park and ride to either sit and read, listen to podcasts or audiobooks, or to nap. Now, when I walk my dog, I leave the back door of my car open because she is old and arthritic, and it's hard for her to get in and out of the car. I usually have to lift her from under her belly to load her into the car. I also leave it open that way because she is fear aggressive with humans due to being abused as a puppy, and she is an aggressive dog. So I like to make sure I can get her in the car quickly if I need to. I also like to park my car between a large van and an SUV that are seemingly abandoned there and just left there for whatever reason, so that my car is kind of hidden and nobody will park by me. Last week, the van wasn't at the parking ride, so I parked to the left of the SUV, as usual, the huge space between my car and any others in that row. I was walking my dog in the grass pretty far away from my car, and as usual, I had the car running with the back door slightly open. I was far enough from it that you wouldn't know if it was mine if you passed by. While walking my dog, I noticed a flash of a silver car out of the corner of my eye and thought that I might be a state trooper, and if it was, because I had both paranoia and an anxiety disorder, that he might reprimand me for walking my dog there. I stayed calm and I continued to walk my dog, intent on getting her to do her business so we could get back in the car and leave. The car passed by once more, and I noticed that it wasn't a state police car. It was a silver Honda with an old man driving. He was purposely driving as close as he could to my dog and I without hitting the curb, and was literally just crawling the car along our path. When I turned around, he did too. He crept past once more, staring out of his open window at me the entire time, and not even watching the road. I got agitated at that point, and resigned myself to the idea that I would have to confront him if he continued to stalk us. He passed by once more, crawling again and trying to get closer. When he realized that I was heading for the cars, he turned around again. I got Karma, my dog, in the car and settled myself into the driver's seat, and took some time to give her a bowl of fresh, clean water, her treats, and took a moment to plug in my laptop to my inverter and charge it for later. I saw the silver car out of the corner of my eye again, and watched as the old man parked a few cars away from mine in the same row, next to a man in a black pickup truck that I noticed was watching this old man curiously. I was thankful the man in the truck was there and watching, and I noticed the way the old man was creeping by me and stalking me. The old man purposely reverse parked so his window was lined up with my driver's side window, and continued to belligerently stare at me from out of his open window, as I did what I needed to before I would leave the park and ride. He was leaning against his door with his head out, and just staring straight at me, not even blinking. I ignored him as I had been doing, carrying on with my business, checking Reddit while I plugged in my phone and organized the belongings in my front seat, and gathered up some garbage to put in the little garbage bag I keep on the floor of the front seat. I was raised to be tough and unafraid, and I wasn't going to let this creepy old man spook me. I looked up after about 10 minutes and he was still staring right at me, still not even blinking. So I turned my head and I avoided eye contact as I put on my seatbelt. I had been running the car the whole time. I walked my dog, so I was good to go. I went to pull out of my spot and my backup camera went off, and I saw that dang silver car right behind me, impeding me from pulling out to my parking spot. At this point, I'm no longer trying to be polite. I give him a nasty look, don't even bother to stop my dog from barking at him, and I say, "I'm fine, thanks." He just nods and slowly, ever so slowly, crawls out of his parking space and down the lot towards the exit, and hangs there as if waiting for me to drive out. My instincts are telling me something is really off with this guy, but I'm trying to rationalize, chalking it up to my paranoia and anxiety and general distrust of people. I tell myself he's probably just a bit senile and means well, but still, I stay stubbornly in my spot and do not leave until he finally gives up and pulls out of the lot, going the opposite way that I was going to. The whole day, the entire incident bothered me. It wasn't until later when talking to my male friend that I realized how messed up the whole thing was. He didn't know which car was mine when he began stalking me. I was nowhere near it. Once I got in my car, he pulled up a few spots away to purposely continue watching me, and seeing that my car was clearly fine and running since I was blasting the AC, and I'd rolled up my windows without any difficulty. I've had cars that have broken down before, and I'm mechanically inclined enough, as my friend pointed out. If my car was broken down, I would have at least had my hood popped, and I would be elbows deep in my engine bay, checking my oil, my other fluids, my belts, my radiator, my battery, and my alternator. I've been there, I've done that a million times. Once again, he had the oxygen tube in his nose and no tank anywhere in sight. I drive an SUV and he was in a Honda sedan, so I was easily able to see into his vehicle. Nothing, nada. The fact that he insisted something was wrong with my car bothered me. It was as if he wanted me to get out of my car to either check, probably thinking because I'm a young, small female that I don't understand mechanics or know when something is wrong with my car, or to prove to him that it was fine. There were no signs at all that anything was wrong with my car, and if there was, I wouldn't be out walking my dog. I'd be in the engine bay on the phone with the towing company, and I would be highly stressed out and filthy. What's even more bothersome is he did this in broad daylight with people watching from their cars. He purposely stalked me as close as he could with his car, nearly driving in the grass, turning around and creeping slowly past me 3 times and following me as I walked, and then parking my car once he saw me get in it. I think he parked next to me and stared at me like that to try to take some time to figure out an excuse or a reason to approach me before he stopped me from leaving and pulled up next to me. The entire thing was incredibly uncomfortable, creepy, off, and gave me Ted Bundy vibes. After all, an elderly man with an oxygen tube in his nose doesn't look like he's capable of harming anyone. But boy, did he want me to get out of that car. Him hanging around the exit to try and catch me leaving was probably the worst of it all. It wasn't enough that he stalked and harassed me in the lot, no. Why not try to follow me to wherever I was going? So, old man at the park and ride with the oxygen tube that connects to nothing. Let's not meet, ever. This happened to my wife while we were dating. When we had started dating, I lived in southern New Hampshire while she lived in Philadelphia. Most of the time, I would come down and visit her. Since she works at a college, she had a few weeks off in December. She decided to come up and stay with me. She packed a week's worth of clothes and her cat in her car and drove up after work. Driving on interstates at night means coffee, which means bathroom breaks. She pulls into a rest stop in Connecticut. And by rest stop, I mean a bathroom, a vending machine, and a rack of tourist brochures. As she's walking towards the building, a man wearing jeans, an army jacket, and a knit cap walks out between 2 cars, startling her. The man immediately reaches out and grabs her head with both hands. He's standing in front of her, arms out straight. She's not able to pull his hands off her head. He's staring into her eyes with a detached expression. As she described it, it's the same expression I use when I'm trying to debug code or figure out why something isn't working. He's moving her head back and forth, keeping her off balance, while keeping her at arm's length. She stares back. He seems to evaluate her for a minute or two, and then lets go and quickly walks into a wooded section. She runs into the rest stop and finds an attendant. She uses the bathroom and then tells the attendant. The attendant is willing to walk her to her car and make sure that she leaves safely. She walks out with the attendant and notes that a white van that was previously in the lot is now gone. She gets in her car, thanks the attendant, and drives off. About 10 minutes later, she processed what happened and she calls me. The bit about the van worried her, but it terrifies me. We talk for a little bit. She's familiar with law enforcement and offenders and has a belief that this wasn't just a failed mugging. She talks to the police, but they didn't seem to be too interested in the incident. What worried her the most was that her cat would have suffered in the cold if something had happened to her. After that, every time I drove between New Hampshire and Pennsylvania, I would stop at that rest stop for a few minutes and look for white vans or that man. I don't know what I would have done or what could be done, but perhaps it's some small way of talking myself into believing that we have control over our lives. Perhaps there's a man in a green army jacket who believes he's found a different way of believing he has control over what happens in life.